largest pool of charitable capital in American history is sitting in accounts that most people have never heard of. $330 billion. Money that has already been called charitable, tax deductions already claimed, and communities still waiting. Welcome to Funding Bravely. I'm Marvin Smith. Earlier in my career, I was doing fundraising work in Dallas. And like a lot of people doing that work, I found myself in conversation with the community foundation that held significant assets under management, a meaningful portion inside donor-advised funds. On paper, that should have been good news. Money already committed to charitable purposes, donors already in relationship with the foundation, a ready infrastructure for giving. But what I kept running into was distance, a gap between where the dollars sat and where the organization doing the work were. Getting capital required navigating foundation staff, institutional capacity, internal priorities, and an incentive structure quietly shaped by how many funds the foundation held, not how much they moved. The dollars weren't locked, but they weren't flowing either. That experience never left me. It was the first time I understood in my bones that the architecture around philanthropic capital shapes what it does, and that the architecture can create delays and distances communities on the other end never agreed to do. That question, how do we close the gap between philanthropic intent and philanthropic action, is why this show exists. Funding Bravely is about the unseen courage of leaders moving money faster, challenging power, and reshaping what justice-rooted action can look like. The point isn't to admire courage, it's to spread it. This 6-episode arc is the first dedicated mini-series of the show, and we're spending it inside a conversation philanthropy isn't having loudly enough. Nonprofits are ending the year with less money than they started. Federal investments in education and housing and food security and civil rights are being gutted in real time. And we're doing this work under an authoritarian regime, one where naming the truth about who needs what comes with real risk, where the basic premise of justice work is being treated as suspect. We're doing this work for many in our field is also an act of resistance. The headwinds aren't only fiscal, they're political. And they're why this conversation can't wait. So this season holds one question. What would it look like to actually move those dollars at the speed of need? Before we go further, let me make sure we're all in the same room. A donor-advised fund, or a DAF, is a charitable giving account. A donor contributes assets, cash, stock, or real estate to an account managed by a sponsoring nonprofit organization. The donor receives an immediate tax deduction at the moment of contribution. Then, over time, they recommend grants from the account to the causes and organizations they care about. That's the basic shape. On paper, it sounds like a straightforward tool for giving. Donor-advised funds first appeared in the 1930s, established by community foundations to receive charitable gifts and manage them on behalf of local donors. For decades, they were niche, used mostly by community foundations to support regional giving. Then in 1991, Fidelity Investments launched the Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund, the first national commercially sponsored DAF. It was a turning point. Major financial institutions recognized that DAFs were a powerful product. Donors could park assets, take the tax deduction immediately, and keep their investment accounts active while they decided on their own timeline where to give. Vanguard, Schwab, and others followed quickly. The vehicle exploded. Today, according to the DAF Research Collaborative, there are more than 1,500 DAF sponsoring organizations in the US. More than half of DAF accounts are held at a community foundation. And the average account size is of $90,000, not $90 million. This is not exclusively a vehicle for the ultra wealthy. It's become a mainstream giving vehicle, and it's growing fast. We're at the leading edge of the largest wealth transfer in human history. $120 trillion changing over hands in the next 20 years. A significant portion of it headed straight into these accounts. Here's what conversations about donor-advised funds are leaving out. DAFs were not designed first and foremost as a vehicle to move money to communities. They were designed as a tax optimization strategy, a way for donors to claim a full charitable deduction in the year of contribution while retaining indefinite influence over when or whether those dollars are ever deployed. The philanthropic vehicle framing came later. It became the story we told and it stuck, even as the underlying incentive infrastructure, and it became the story we told and it stuck, even as the underlying incentive structure stayed exactly the same. There's no legal requirement that DAF assets ever leave the account, no mandatory payout timeline, no required distribution rate, even as the distribution rate averages at a higher amount than the 5% payout required at institutional philanthropies by the IRS. With DAFs, once dollars go in, the tax benefit is captured and the rest is optional. The explosive growth of DAFs is not primarily a sign of philanthropic momentum. It is a sign that wealth preservation dressed as generosity is working exactly as it was designed to work. We've got the power to change that. I'm not saying DAFs are bad. I'm saying that the way a vehicle was built shapes what it does. And if we want it to do something different, something that meets this moment, we have to be honest about what we're actually working with. Over the mini-series, you'll hear from some of the sharpest people I know. You'll hear from inside DAF sponsorship, someone who spent years at the center of how these vehicles are built and managed, and what that experience reveals about where the design falls short. You'll hear from the front lines of community proximate and reparative philanthropy leaders, folks who can name with precision and moral clarity whose wealth is sitting in these accounts and what repair actually requires. You'll hear from a DAF holder who's been spending down on purpose for 16 years and who has things to say about what intentional use looks like that you don't often hear said in public. And we close by looking ahead, naming the policy levers and structural shifts that can move this vehicle closer to the urgency this moment demands. I'm not coming in with all the answers. I'm coming in with questions, and I want you to carry them with me. Why are so many dollars sitting while needs escalate? Who bears the cost of the gap between philanthropic intent and philanthropic action? And who should? How do we make sure the wealth transfer of our lifetime creates community wealth, not just philanthropic wealth? What does courage actually look like in this work? For donors, for advisors, for sponsors, for all of us. And the question this whole season turns on, what coalition is needed to advance bolder change, and who needs to be at the table? This isn't a season about whether DAFs are good or bad. It's a season about whether knowing what they were built for and what this moment demands, if we have the courage to use them differently. DAFs weren't built to move money to communities. They were built to park it with intention. The question is whether we have the courage to change what the vehicle is actually used for. Our next episode is dropping soon. Subscribe to Funding Bravely on Substack to follow along. Episodes are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Thank you, and I'll see y'all again soon.